Dr. Ramaraju, Mr. Ruben, Mr. David, Dinesh, and all the distinguished delegates. Satyameva Jayate na Anrutam. Truth alone triumphs and wins, and untruth gets conquered and it vanishes. This is a saying with which all Indians are quite familiar because it is part of our national emblem, Satyameva Jayate. If you just look at its origin, it is more than 6,000 years old, derived from the Upanishads, which are only a distillation of the Vedas. It is understood that the Vedas, which are collection of hymns, over 100,000, in excess of 100,000 in number. But today we have left with us no more than about 1100 parts, which is itself very huge because each hymn runs into several hundreds of couplets. And it is very interesting that the Vedas, the various hymns, they are supposed to be some of the collection of mantras which will be effective only if they are recited in a particular accent, in a particular tune, in particular, vibration it generates and produces the desired result. But how did they want to preserve? The chances of corruption were very much there. See, if you see the mutation of languages over a period, it is really, you can't understand possibly, I can't understand possibly today my own mother tongue, Telugu, the way it was spoken several hundred years ago, 400-500 years ago. So what was the science behind preservation of not only the text, but also the intonation, so they had what is called the Ghanapati. Ghanapat means that is an extended text which had inbuilt safeguards against losing even one word. A word is repeated in a particular way a number of times, and then the next word comes and is repeated in a certain number, 8 times, 12 times, 14 times. So depending on the geometry of the whole principle of preservation. That's how they preserved not only the text but also the way it is to be pronounced. Today it is in several parts of India, and very few people are left who can recite the whole thing. Probably a collection of few thousand Pandits in this country put together, they can produce the whole text of the Vedas. That is the kind of fact of life. Over 6, 7, 8,000 years is what tells us. That's why I started with this, a simple word, Satyameva Jayate. How old is it? How is it preserved? How was it preserved all along? And how do we have it today? And to Ruben's question now, why and for whom? He ended it, I think, is very correct. I think I must consider that the sages of those years, 6,000 years, also would have thought, and why and for whom? Obviously for the society, and not, of course, the lady, not only for the lady in the black sweater as she was repeatedly referring. Is what if they had targeted the lady in the black sweater, probably we would not have had all this knowledge today. No, I'm not. After 20, 30, 40 years, the sheer physical existence of the medium is questionable, is doubtful. How do you? We need to work on these standards. It was 96, 97. That I wrote down a note that, yes, I have done this, but I have these doubts for the future that needs to be taken care of for preservation of these documents. So, that is the basic question. I think I am very glad we have come a long way since then, and we are more on a surer ground, on a better wicket today than we were when I was doing that project. So, today we have actually a large number of projects all over India which have gone digital, providing electronic services to citizens. A lot of businesses are gone digital, and they are providing instantaneous services to the people. We have also got out a policy on open data. The entire government data should be put in digital form and thrown open to the public, except that which is classified. This is a policy which was brought in last year. So, a lot of data is getting accumulated now around that open data platform. opendata.gov.in is where it is hosted. We are also bringing in a legislation called the Electronic Delivery of Services Act, which will ultimately compel all the government agencies to go digital within a period of 5 years, extendable up to 8 years. So, at the end of it, this all is pushing us towards digits, zeros and ones. So, all the more pressure on creating sustainable, stable, standard systems for preservation. Because there are two things in this, as I see: the size of the records and the longevity of the records required. What does forever mean? We need to have clarity. What kind of records are really needed forever? And whatever other records shall be allowed to be lapsed or deleted. We should get clarity. The open-ended statement, like forever, eternity, preserved forever. This is the legal language. I have Dr. Ukrani sitting there, probably from legal sense he would say that the court records are also supposed to be preserved forever, some of them. So we need to put otherwise it will put an open-ended burden and tension on all of us here. What is needed is, of course, there are definitely certain records which need to be preserved forever. Like the quote I started with, Satyameva Jayate. There is no question, it will be invariant, it has to be preserved. There are such things, but there are very few such things, possibly. Therefore, number one, the first point I would like to make is that it is size multiplied by longevity. Terabyte years is what we have to go by as the yardstick in this digital preservation area. That shows the size of the problem, and not either terabytes or the number of years required for preservation. A multiplication of these two is what I mean, number one. Second, the trusted digital repositories is a concept that needs to be also explored, perfected, and then brought into a level of acceptability. Because what is in the digital medium, no one has seen with his or her eye. It's not seeable in future also. It is something which can only be machine read and displayed. So, as to the authenticity of the object that we are trying to see, digital object, I think more thinking, we have digital signatures, we have electronic signatures today, but is it good enough for today? Will it be good enough for the future? Will it evolve into something more? What is the roadmap for this? Does every document need to be digitally signed if it is to be authenticated? Is there any other way? So this is one area that again calls for attention, discussion, and stabilization. Third is the legal admissibility of all this in future. When a document is converted from analog to digital, or a document which is born digital, or an object which is born digital, there could be two different things. So, and having been born digital also, it could be converted into a different format. So, what happens to its sanctity? Is it true as original? True to the original? Or what is the legal connotation of such conversion? So, we need to have a comprehensive policy on what to preserve, how long to preserve, what safeguards need to be taken to be, that it is properly preserved and in a legally valid manner. And what are the consequences of not so preserving, and who is responsible, who is made responsible in the society for such preservation, and the consequences of not preserving it. So we have to bind all this in an act, at least for the time being, and then possibly the preservation of the act itself is again a doubtful or a debatable thing. Maybe 30-40 years later it needs to be rewritten. That's a different thing, but we have to make a beginning in that area. The fourth point I would like to mention is that DeitY is alive to these facts, and accordingly we started a Center of Excellence for Digital Preservation, and then CDAC has been doing a very dedicated work in this area, and a few months back we have published formally the standards as we understand them today, after going by the international best practices and international standards in this area. We compiled all of them and contextualized to the Indian requirements, and then published as a set of standards and guidelines. So I hope that this will be a good starting point for all the, not only researcher, but also the practitioners, whoever is dealing with the digit, it should make a sense for such people. So I hope that the Center of Excellence will really grow further, given the magnitude of the kind of problem that we are discussing today and its importance. It will grow, this COE should grow bigger and bigger and become the single reference point for any authentic opinion on this digital preservation. And just to sum up, what we need is a very cogent and comprehensive policy, preferably legislation, on digital preservation. The second is building the demand, creating the awareness among all the digital practitioners. In fact, every part of the society is today touched and handled. Even medical practitioners, advocates, everybody is working on this. It is meaningful for everyone. So not only the general awareness, but also sector specific awareness, because the requirements vary widely across sectors. So sector specific workshops and sensitization has to take place, so that the demand is thereby created. We have to create something like Y2K. We have to scare people out of their souls. Your documents will not be valid beyond 2111 or something. So some magic number like Y2K you have to create and say that the world will come to a stop. Then I think people will go hurrying and scurrying after this, and we have more energy around this subject. So on the serious side, we need more awareness, more demand to look at these standards and comply with these standards on preservation. Number 3 is the enforcement of this. Otherwise, people tend to be lax, because heavens are not going to fall or hell is not going to break loose if I am just little lax on these preservation practices. So we need to put fear of God in through certain mechanism. I would not exactly like it to be a policing mechanism, but some kind of self-enforcement mechanism, self-policing mechanism. And 4th, which I think will really make the wheels move, is creation of attractive business models in consultation with the industry. Like Ramaraju was mentioning, that it is ultimately the enterprise. If you create a value proposition, if you attract the entrepreneurs into this area who can make a business out of it, then obviously that is a factor that will preserve this concept. Because it is, at the end of the day, let us come to realize that it is the money, the concept called money, that has sustained the society and various activities in the society, and small and large economies and enterprises over centuries and millenniums. So it is fundamental for us. When we are having that kind of a long haul in view, it's time that we create value proposition and let the entrepreneurs create business models around this preservation concept and provide services. Then that is a sure, guarantee that the digital preservation has come to stay and will stay on and catch up momentum in future. So I am very happy to have been associated with this project, because it has to do with one of my very first projects that I did in the digital area, the e-governance area, which had an immense requirement for preservation, and it is going to be appropriately met through this initiative. So I thank all the participants who have come from different parts of the world and this country to put their heads together in this manner. And at the end of the day, at the end of the conference, we have much more clearer understanding of the various dimensions of the digital preservation. Thank you and all the best.